Madison Claire Thompson had everything that so many people dream of having in life. At 28 years old, she was young, successful, and blessed with over 3 million followers across her social media platforms. Her career as a travel influencer had taken her to the most breathtaking corners of the world, and her content consistently showcased luxury hotels, paradise-like landscapes, and moments that painted the picture of an absolutely perfect life. Every post, every story, every carefully curated video seemed to whisper to her audience that dreams really could come true, that with enough determination and authenticity, anyone could build the life they truly wanted. Madison's followers didn't just see her as an influencer. They saw her as a friend, a sister, someone who had made it against all odds. Born and raised in a small town in Ohio, she had worked her way up from sharing simple travel tips on a modest blog to becoming one of the most trusted voices in luxury travel. Her genuine personality, warm smile, and ability to make even the most exclusive experiences feel accessible had earned her partnerships with some of the most prestigious hospitality brands in the world. But 6 months ago, this carefully crafted image of perfection shattered in the most abrupt and inexplicable way possible. The woman who had shared every moment of her life with millions of people simply vanished, leaving behind a mystery that would haunt everyone who knew her story. It was late September when Madison announced to her followers that she would be taking what she called the most exclusive getaway of my life. She had secured a booking at Crystal Cove, a private luxury estate nestled on a secluded island off the coast of Maine. The property was accessible only by private boat and promised the kind of isolation and elegance that her most discerning followers craved to see. Crystal Cove wasn't just any vacation rental, it was a meticulously restored Victorian mansion that had been transformed into the ultimate luxury retreat, complete with its own private beach, helicopter landing pad, and amenities that most people could only dream of experiencing. The estate had been featured in architectural magazines and had hosted celebrities, tech billionaires, and royalty from around the world. For Madison, it represented the pinnacle of her career, a chance to showcase a property so exclusive that most people would never even know it existed, let alone have the opportunity to stay there. The booking had cost her nearly $20,000 for a week-long stay, but she knew the content she would create would be worth every penny. Madison spent weeks preparing for the trip, working with her assistant Emma Rodriguez to plan every detail of the content they would produce. They mapped out story arcs, planned photo shoots for different times of day, and even coordinated with the property management to ensure they could capture the estate's most photogenic angles. Madison's excitement was palpable in the weeks leading up to the trip. She would often call Emma late at night, her voice filled with the kind of enthusiasm that had made her followers fall in love with her in the first place. "Emma, I can't sleep," Madison had said during one of their late-night planning calls just 3 days before her departure. "I keep thinking about all the incredible content we're going to create. This could be the series that takes everything to the next level. I can feel it in my bones. This trip is going to change everything." Emma, who had been working with Madison for over 2 years, had never heard her boss sound more excited about a project. Madison had always been passionate about her work, but there was something different about her energy in those final days before the trip. She seemed almost mystical in her certainty that Crystal Cove would be special, that it would offer something she had never been able to capture before. On the morning of her departure, Madison's parents, David and Susan Thompson, drove the 3 hours from their home in Columbus to see her off from the private airfield, where she would catch her chartered flight to Maine. David, a retired high school principal, and Susan, a former nurse who now volunteered at their local hospital, had always been Madison's biggest supporters. They had watched their daughter's dreams grow from childhood fantasies to concrete reality, and they never stopped being amazed by the life she had built for herself. "You be careful up there, sweetheart," Susan had said as she hugged her daughter goodbye that Tuesday morning. "I know it's going to be beautiful, but promise me you'll check in every day. You know how I worry when you're so far away." Madison laughed, the sound carrying that familiar warmth that her followers loved so much. "Mom, you know I'm going to be documenting every single moment. You'll probably see more of my trip than I will with all the content I'm planning to create. Besides, it's a luxury estate, not a camping trip. The worst thing that could happen is running out of champagne." David shook his head with the fond exasperation of a father who had watched his daughter grow from a little girl with big dreams into a successful woman with an even bigger heart. "Your mother's right to worry, Maddie. Promise us you'll be smart about everything. I know you've been to dozens of places by yourself, but this one sounds pretty isolated." Madison kissed both her parents on the cheek and shouldered her designer travel bag, the same one she had carried to countless destinations around the world. "I promise I'll be careful, and I promise I'll call. Now stop worrying and start getting excited. You're going to see some of the most incredible content I've ever created." As the small chartered plane taxied down the runway, Madison waved through the window at her parents, who stood watching until the aircraft disappeared into the morning sky. It would be the last time they would see their daughter's bright smile, the last time they would hear her infectious laugh, the last time they would feel the kind of peace that comes from knowing your child is safe and happy in the world. The flight to Maine took just over 2 hours, and Madison spent the entire journey editing photos from her previous trip and responding to messages from her followers. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, brands wanting to collaborate, followers sharing their own travel dreams, and fellow influencers checking in about her upcoming adventure. Madison felt that familiar rush of gratitude that always came when she remembered how many people's lives she was able to touch through her work. The plane touched down at a private airfield outside Bar Harbor, where a driver was waiting to take her to the marina. Madison's first Instagram story of the trip showed the scenic drive through Maine's coastal landscape, her voice narrating over the footage with the kind of genuine enthusiasm that had made her famous. "You guys, I literally cannot believe how beautiful Maine is in the fall." Her voice bubbled with excitement as she filmed the changing leaves and glimpses of the Atlantic Ocean. "I've been to so many incredible places, but there's something about New England that just takes your breath away. And we haven't even gotten to Crystal Cove yet." The drive to the marina took 45 minutes, winding through small coastal towns that looked like they had been pulled straight from a postcard. Madison found herself genuinely enchanted by the charm of the region. The lobster shacks, the weathered fishing boats, the way the afternoon light seemed to make everything glow with a golden warmth. She made a mental note to plan a longer trip to Maine in the future, maybe during peak foliage season, to really explore the area's hidden gems. At the marina, Madison was met by Captain Robert "Bobby" Williams, a weathered man in his 60s, who had been running boat services to Crystal Cove for over 15 years. Bobby had ferried countless celebrities and wealthy guests to the island, but he always maintained a professional discretion that the property's elite clientele appreciated. Madison liked him immediately. There was something about his steady demeanor and kind eyes that reminded her of her grandfather, who had passed away when she was in college. "Welcome to Maine, Miss Thompson," Bobby said as he helped her with her luggage. "Beautiful day for the crossing. The island's looking particularly stunning this time of year. You picked the perfect week to visit." The boat ride to Crystal Cove took 25 minutes, cutting through calm waters that reflected the late afternoon sky like a mirror. Madison documented every moment, capturing the way the Maine coastline gradually gave way to the open ocean, the excitement building in her voice as they approached the island. When Crystal Cove finally came into view, even Madison, who had seen some of the most beautiful places on Earth, was struck speechless. The island rose from the Atlantic like something from a dream. The Victorian mansion sat perched on a bluff overlooking the ocean, its ornate architecture somehow both grand and welcoming against the backdrop of the endless sea. Gardens cascaded down toward the water, where a private beach stretched between rocky outcroppings that had been carved by centuries of waves. The entire scene looked like it had been painted by an artist who understood that true beauty comes from the perfect marriage of nature and human creativity. "Oh my goodness," Madison whispered, her camera still rolling as they approached the private dock. This is absolutely incredible. I don't think any of my photos are going to do this justice. It's like stepping into a fairy tale." Bobby helped her off the boat and onto the dock, where a golf cart waited to transport her and her luggage up to the main house. As they wound their way up the carefully maintained path, Madison continued to film, her excitement growing with every turn that revealed another breathtaking view of the estate. The property manager, a woman named Jennifer Hayes, who had been working at Crystal Cove for over a decade, met them at the front entrance. Jennifer was exactly what Madison had expected from a luxury estate manager, impeccably dressed, professionally warm, and clearly someone who understood that attention to detail was what separated a good experience from an extraordinary one. "Miss Thompson, welcome to Crystal Cove," Jennifer said with a smile that was both genuine and practiced. "We're absolutely delighted to have you here. I've been following your work for months, and I have to say we're all excited to see how you capture the magic of this place." Madison was immediately charmed by Jennifer's warmth and professionalism. As they walked through the mansion's grand entrance hall, Jennifer began what would become a 45-minute tour of the property, highlighting features that Madison knew would translate into incredible content. The mansion had been restored with a level of attention to detail that was almost staggering. Every piece of furniture had been carefully selected, every room had been designed to maximize both comfort and visual impact, and every window had been positioned to frame a different spectacular view of the island. The master suite, where Madison would be staying, occupied the entire third floor of the mansion and featured a wraparound deck that offered 360-degree views of the island and the ocean beyond. The bathroom was like something from a luxury spa, with a clawfoot tub positioned perfectly to take advantage of the sunset views. The bedroom itself was elegantly appointed with antique furniture and modern amenities seamlessly integrated throughout. "This is absolutely perfect," Madison said as she set her camera on the bed and began filming the room. "I've stayed in luxury hotels all over the world, and I can honestly say I've never seen anything quite like this. The attention to detail is just incredible." Jennifer beamed with pride as she showed Madison the suite's various features: the hidden television that emerged from a piece of antique furniture, the sound system that was virtually invisible but filled the room with crystal-clear audio, the climate control system that maintained perfect temperature and humidity levels throughout the space. As the tour concluded and Jennifer prepared to leave Madison to settle in, she handed over a leather portfolio containing information about the island's amenities and suggested activities. "There's also a satellite phone in the master suite," Jennifer mentioned as they wrapped up. "Cell service can be a bit spotty out here, especially during weather changes, but the satellite phone will always work if you need to reach the mainland for any reason." Madison nodded, though the mention of spotty cell service made her slightly anxious. Her entire career depended on staying connected to her audience, and the thought of being unable to post content or respond to her followers made her feel uneasy. But she reminded herself that the isolation was part of what made Crystal Cove so special, and that her followers would understand if there were occasional gaps in her posting schedule. After Jennifer left, Madison spent the next hour unpacking and setting up her equipment in preparation for the evening's content creation session. She had planned to capture the sunset from the master suite's deck, and she wanted everything to be perfect. As she arranged her cameras and checked her lighting equipment, she found herself feeling more excited about her project than she had in months. The sun was beginning to set as Madison stepped out onto the deck with her camera, ready to capture what she knew would be some of the most stunning footage of her career. The view was even more breathtaking than she had anticipated. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold that seemed almost too perfect to be real, and the ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon. But as Madison began filming, something started to feel off. She couldn't quite put her finger on what was bothering her, but there was an undercurrent of unease that she couldn't shake. The beauty of the place was undeniable, but there was something else, something that made her feel like she was being watched, even though she knew she was completely alone on the island. Madison tried to push the feeling aside and focus on her work. She filmed several segments about the beauty of the estate, the incredible luxury of the accommodations, and her excitement about the week ahead. But even as she spoke to her camera with her usual enthusiasm, she could hear a subtle tremor in her voice that her most perceptive followers would definitely notice. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars began to appear, Madison went back inside and prepared for dinner. The estate staff had left her a selection of gourmet options in the kitchen, along with a bottle of champagne. and a note welcoming her to Crystal Cove. She decided to keep things simple for her first night and prepared a light meal while continuing to document her experience for her followers. It was around 9 o'clock when Madison set up her camera in the living room for what would become one of her most watched pieces of content ever. She had planned to film a relaxed evening segment, sharing her first impressions of the estate and her plans for the upcoming week. The lighting was perfect, the setting was incredibly photogenic, and Madison felt like she was hitting her stride after the strange uneasiness she had experienced earlier. "Hey everyone," she began, her voice carrying that familiar warmth that had made millions of people feel like they were talking to a trusted friend. "I'm coming to you from the most incredible place I've ever stayed. Crystal Cove is absolutely magical. I mean, you've seen some of the footage already, but it's even more beautiful in person than I could have imagined." Madison continued talking for several minutes, sharing details about the estate's history, the incredible attention to detail in every room, and her plans for documenting the property over the next week. Her enthusiasm was genuine and infectious, and she could already imagine the positive response the video would receive from her followers. But then, as she was describing the view from the master suite, something changed in her expression. The camera was still rolling, and her followers would later analyze every frame of the footage, trying to understand what had caused the subtle shift in her demeanor. "The estate is absolutely stunning," Madison continued, but there was now a note of hesitation in her voice that hadn't been there moments before. "But I have to be honest with you guys. There's something about this place that's making me feel a little, I don't know, uncomfortable, I guess. I can't really explain it." Madison paused, looking directly into the camera with an expression that would later be described by viewers as troubled, uncertain, even slightly frightened. "It's probably just because it's so isolated out here, and I'm not used to being completely alone in such a big place. But there's this feeling like I'm not actually alone, you know? Like someone's watching me, even though I know that's impossible." She laughed nervously, trying to shake off the mood that had settled over her. "I'm probably just being paranoid because it's my first night, and the place is so quiet. Tomorrow I'm sure I'll feel more settled, and I'll be able to show you guys some absolutely incredible content. This place really is surreal, in the most beautiful way possible." Madison continued filming for a few more minutes, trying to recapture the enthusiasm she had felt earlier in the evening, but the uneasiness had taken hold. And even her most loyal followers would later comment that something seemed different about her energy in those final minutes of the video. What none of them knew was that this would be the last piece of content Madison Claire Thompson would ever create. 6 hours after she finished filming, her social media accounts would go completely silent. No stories, no posts, no messages. For a woman who had shared every moment of her life with millions of people, the sudden silence was deafening. By the next morning, when Jennifer Hayes arrived at the mansion for her daily check-in, she would discover something that would turn Crystal Cove from a luxury paradise into the center of one of the most baffling missing person cases in Maine's history. The door to the master suite would be locked from the inside, with the key sitting on the bedside table. All of Madison's belongings, her clothes, her camera equipment, her phone, her laptop, her wallet, even her passport, would be exactly where she had left them. The only thing missing would be Madison herself. Emma Rodriguez had worked as a personal assistant for 3 different influencers before Madison, and she thought she understood the rhythm of her boss's life better than anyone. Madison was disciplined about her posting schedule, almost obsessively so. She would rather cancel dinner plans than miss uploading her evening story, and she had never, not once in the 2 years Emma had worked for her, gone more than 6 hours without some form of social media activity. So when Madison's Instagram account showed no activity Wednesday morning, Emma's first reaction wasn't panic, it was confusion. She checked her phone again, thinking maybe there was a technical glitch or that she had somehow missed a notification. But Madison's last post was still the video from Tuesday night, the one where she had mentioned feeling uncomfortable but had tried to laugh it off. Emma was in her apartment in Los Angeles, 3 time zones behind Maine, and she calculated that it was almost noon on the East Coast. By this time, Madison would normally have posted her morning routine, shared at least 2 stories about her breakfast and her plans for the day, and probably sent Emma a string of excited text messages about all the content ideas she had developed. Overnight, instead, there was nothing but silence. Emma tried calling Madison's cell phone first, then the estate's landline number that Jennifer Hayes had provided in their pre-trip communications. Both calls went straight to voicemail. She told herself that the cell service issues Jennifer had mentioned were probably worse than expected, and that Madison was likely just having trouble getting a strong enough signal to upload content. But as Wednesday afternoon stretched into evening, Emma's confusion transformed into genuine worry. She had sent Madison a dozen text messages and left 4 voicemails, none of which had been returned. Madison's social media accounts remained frozen in time, showing that last video from Tuesday night where she had seemed so unsettled about something she couldn't quite identify. By Wednesday night, Emma was no longer trying to convince herself that everything was fine. She called Madison's parents in Ohio, waking them up at nearly midnight with a phone call that would change their lives forever. "Mrs. Thompson?" Emma's voice was shaky as Susan Thompson answered the phone. "This is Emma, Madison's assistant. I'm so sorry to call so late, but I'm really worried about Madison. She hasn't posted anything since yesterday night and she's not answering her phone." Susan Thompson was instantly awake, that maternal instinct that never truly sleeps immediately, alerting her that something was wrong. "What do you mean she hasn't posted anything? She posts constantly when she's traveling." "That's exactly what I mean," Emma said, her voice tight with anxiety. "She always posts constantly, especially from somewhere as beautiful as that estate. But her last post was Tuesday night around 9 o'clock, and there's been nothing since. Then no stories, no posts, no responses to any of my messages. Mrs. Thompson, this isn't like her at all." David Thompson was awake now too, and Susan put the call on speaker so they could both hear Emma's concerns. "Have you tried calling the estate directly?" David asked, his voice carrying the calm authority that had served him well during his decades as a high school principal. "I tried the main number twice, but it goes to voicemail," Emma replied. "I don't think there's anyone on the island except Madison and maybe some maintenance staff. The whole point of the place is that it's completely private and isolated." Susan and David exchanged worried glances. They had been following Madison's career long enough to understand that her social media presence wasn't just a hobby. It was her livelihood, her passion, and her way of staying connected to the world. For her to go silent for almost 24 hours without explanation was completely out of character. "We'll try to reach her too," Susan said, though she could hear the tremor in her own voice. "If we don't hear from her by tomorrow morning, we'll figure out what to do next." None of them slept that night. Emma sat in her apartment, refreshing Madison's social media accounts every few minutes and sending increasingly desperate text messages that never received responses. Susan and David lay awake in their bed in Ohio, alternating between calling Madison's phone and researching everything they could find about Crystal Cove online. What they discovered during their late-night internet searches didn't make them feel any better. Crystal Cove was indeed as exclusive and isolated as Madison had described. The estate's website was sparse on details, focusing more on luxury amenities than practical information about communication or emergency procedures. The island was privately owned, accessible only by boat or helicopter, and located far enough from the mainland that conventional cell phone service was unreliable at best. Thursday morning brought no relief. Madison's social media accounts remained eerily silent, and her phone continued to go straight to voicemail. Emma called the local authorities in Bar Harbor, but was told that since Madison was an adult who had chosen to stay in an isolated location, they couldn't consider it a missing person case until she had been out of contact for at least 48 hours. Jennifer Hayes, the estate manager, had been completely unreachable since Tuesday afternoon, which Emma found increasingly suspicious. According to the estate's booking information, Jennifer was supposed to be available for guest services throughout Madison's stay, but repeated calls to her direct number went unanswered. By Thursday afternoon, David Thompson had taken matters into his own hands. He called the Coast Guard station in Bar Harbor and explained the situation to Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, who was immediately more receptive to his concerns than the local police had been. "Mr. Thompson," Lieutenant Commander Mitchell said, her voice professional but compassionate, I understand your worry, and I think your instincts are right to be concerned. Crystal Cove is pretty remote, and if your daughter isn't responding to attempts to contact her, that's definitely not normal behavior for someone in the hospitality industry. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell promised to send a patrol boat to Crystal Cove to conduct a welfare check. The Coast Guard vessel would arrive at the island Friday morning, which meant that Madison would have been out of contact for almost 3 full days by the time anyone official checked on her welfare. Emma flew from Los Angeles to Maine on Thursday night, unable to sit in her apartment any longer while her boss and friend remained missing. She rented a car at the Portland airport and drove straight to Bar Harbor, where she checked into a hotel and prepared to join whatever search efforts might be necessary. David and Susan Thompson were on a plane to Maine by Friday morning, their hearts heavy with the kind of dread that every parent fears but hopes never to experience. They had spent the previous night making arrangements with their neighbors to take care of their house and their cat, canceling their weekend plans and trying to mentally prepare themselves for whatever they might find when they reached Maine. The Seoul Coast Guard patrol boat reached Crystal Cove at exactly 9:15 Friday morning. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell was aboard, along with 2 other officers and a paramedic, just in case they found Madison in need of medical attention. As they approached the island's private dock, everything appeared completely normal. The mansion looked peaceful and well-maintained, the gardens were immaculate, and there was no sign of any disturbance or emergency. Jennifer Hayes met them at the dock, appearing flustered and apologetic. She explained that she had been dealing with a family emergency on the mainland since Wednesday morning and had been unable to return to the island to check on Madison. She had assumed that Madison was simply enjoying her privacy and had deliberately chosen to disconnect from social media for a few days. I know she mentioned in her video that she was feeling a bit overwhelmed by the isolation, Jennifer said as she led the Coast Guard officers up to the mansion. I thought maybe she had decided to take a digital detox. Some guests do that. They come here specifically to get away from the pressure of constant connectivity. But as they approached the master suite, Jennifer's confidence began to waver. She knocked on the door and called Madison's name, but there was no response. When she tried the handle, she found the door locked from the inside. "Madison," Jennifer called, her voice growing more concerned. "Madison, it's Jennifer. I have some officers here who just want to make sure you're okay." Still no response. "Lieutenant." Commander Mitchell stepped forward and identified herself loudly enough to be heard through the door. "Miss Thompson, this is Lieutenant Commander Mitchell with the Coast Guard. Your family is worried about you, and we're here to conduct a welfare check. Can you please respond if you can hear me?" The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer retrieved the master key from her office and unlocked the door, her hands shaking as she turned the handle. The suite was immaculate, exactly as it had been when Madison had checked in 3 days earlier. The bed was neatly made. Madison's clothes were carefully organized in the closet, and her camera equipment was arranged on the desk, just as she had left it Tuesday night. But Madison was nowhere to be found. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell and her officers conducted a systematic search of the suite, while Jennifer stood in the doorway, her face pale with shock. Madison's phone was plugged into its charger on the nightstand, her laptop was closed on the desk, and her wallet was in her purse, complete with cash, credit cards, and identification. Her passport was in the leather portfolio where she had placed it Tuesday evening. Even more puzzling, the door had been locked from the inside, with the key sitting on the bedside table where Madison had apparently placed it before. Before what? Where could she have gone? How could she have left the room if the door was locked from the inside and the key was inside with her belongings? The Coast Guard officers expanded their search to the entire mansion, then to the grounds of the estate. They called Madison's name repeatedly, their voices echoing across the islands, carefully maintained gardens, and down to the private beach. They searched every room, every closet, every possible hiding place, but found no trace of the missing woman. By the time Emma arrived at the island that afternoon, along with Madison's parents, the Coast Guard had launched a full-scale search operation. Additional boats were scouring the waters around the island, while officers with search dogs were combing through every inch of Crystal Cove's 47 acres. Susan Thompson's first reaction upon seeing her daughter's belongings untouched in the master suite was complete bewilderment. "This doesn't make any sense," she kept repeating as she looked at Madison's carefully packed suitcase and organized toiletries. "Madison is the most responsible person I know. She would never just leave all her things behind. She would never disappear without telling someone where she was going." David Thompson, drawing on his years of experience dealing with crisis situations at school, tried to approach the situation logically. "What about the security cameras?" he asked Jennifer. "A property this exclusive must have surveillance systems." Jennifer nodded, though her expression suggested she wasn't optimistic about what the cameras might reveal. "We do have security cameras throughout the property, but the system has been having some technical issues lately. Let me show you what we have." The security footage from Crystal Cove would prove to be one of the most frustrating aspects of the entire investigation. The cameras showed Madison moving around the mansion normally throughout Tuesday evening, documenting her stay and preparing her content just as she had described in her final video. The last clear image of her was time-stamped at 10:13 p.m. Tuesday night, showing her walking up the stairs toward the master suite. After that, the footage became problematic in ways that the security company couldn't fully explain. Starting around 10:30 p.m. Tuesday night, the cameras began experiencing intermittent failures, brief blackouts lasting anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 minutes, followed by normal operation, then more blackouts. The pattern continued throughout the night and into Wednesday morning, making it impossible to determine exactly when Madison had left the master suite or where she might have gone. "We've never seen anything like this with our system before," explained Thomas Reed, the technician, who arrived from the security company Friday afternoon. "It's almost like someone was interfering with the cameras remotely, but that shouldn't be possible with our setup. The system is hardwired and doesn't connect to any external networks that could be accessed from outside the property." The security footage raised more questions than it answered, and as Friday evening approached, the search team was no closer to understanding what had happened to Madison Claire Thompson. The Coast Guard had expanded their search radius to include the waters for miles around Crystal Cove, while local police had been brought in to conduct interviews with everyone who had any connection to the estate. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. It wasn't until Saturday morning, when a digital forensics expert arrived to examine Madison's electronic devices, that investigators discovered the detail that would transform this from a puzzling disappearance into something far more sinister and inexplicable. Detective Rebecca Walsh had been with the Maine State Police for 15 years, and she had investigated everything from domestic disputes to complex financial fraud cases. But as she stood in the master suite of Crystal Cove on Saturday morning, examining Madison Thompson's abandoned belongings, she felt a creeping sense of unease that was unlike anything she had experienced in her career. Walsh had been called in Friday night when the Coast Guard search operation failed to turn up any trace of Madison. Missing person cases involving adults were often straightforward. People left of their own accord, usually for reasons that became clear once investigators dug into their personal lives. But everything about Madison's disappearance felt wrong to Walsh, from the locked door to the untouched belongings to the complete absence of any logical explanation for where she might have gone. "Detective Walsh, I think you need to see this." The voice belonged to Marcus Chen, a digital forensics specialist who had arrived from Portland early Saturday morning to examine Madison's electronic devices. Chen had a reputation for being able to recover data from devices that other experts had given up on, and Walsh had specifically requested his assistance because she suspected that Madison's phone and laptop might hold the key to understanding what had happened. Walsh found Chen in the suite's sitting area, hunched over Madison's iPhone with a collection of specialized equipment spread across the coffee table. His expression was troubled in a way that immediately caught her attention. "What did you find?" Walsh asked, pulling up a chair next to Chen. "This is going to sound bizarre," Chen said, not looking up from the phone's screen. "But according to the device logs, someone deleted a video file from this phone at 10:17 p.m. on Tuesday night." Walsh frowned. "That doesn't sound bizarre at all. Maybe Madison filmed something she didn't like and deleted it." "That's what I thought at first," Chen replied, finally meeting her eyes. "But here's the thing. The deletion process that was used isn't something you can do through the phone's normal interface. Someone would have needed specialized knowledge and specific tools to remove a file this way. Chen turned the phone toward Walsh and showed her a screen filled with technical data that meant nothing to her. See these timestamps? The video was recorded at 10:13 p.m. and it was deleted using a method that bypasses the phone's standard deletion process. Instead of going to the recently deleted folder where it could be recovered, it was wiped from the device's memory in a way that makes recovery nearly impossible. Nearly impossible, but not completely impossible, Walsh asked, hoping Chen's expertise might provide a breakthrough. I've been trying for hours, Chen said, shaking his head. Whatever this video showed, someone really didn't want it to be found. The deletion was surgical. They knew exactly what they were doing. Walsh felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying someone with technical expertise deliberately destroyed evidence? That's exactly what I'm saying, and there's something else. Chen pulled up another screen on his laptop. The phone's GPS shows that it was moved around the master suite until 10:17 p.m. Tuesday night. After that time, the GPS data shows the phone remaining stationary on the nightstand where we found it. But here's the weird part. The phone was accessed again at 10:21 p.m., 4 minutes after the GPS data indicates it stopped moving. Walsh stared at the data, trying to make sense of what Chen was telling her. So, someone accessed the phone after it was placed on the nightstand? Not just accessed it, Chen corrected. Someone unlocked it, opened the camera app, recorded the video that was later deleted, and then performed the specialized deletion process, all while the phone was sitting exactly where we found it. That's impossible, Walsh said. Madison would have had to be right there to unlock the phone and operate the camera. I know it's impossible, Chen replied. That's what makes this so disturbing. According to this data, Madison was operating her phone normally until 10:17 p.m., at which point the device was placed on the nightstand and never moved again. But then 4 minutes later, someone used that same phone to record a video that someone went to extraordinary lengths to ensure could never be recovered. Walsh stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the ocean while she tried to process what Chen had discovered. The security footage showed Madison walking upstairs at 10:13 p.m., and the phone data indicated she had been using the device normally until 10:17 p.m., but the cameras had also started malfunctioning around 10:30 p.m., creating gaps in the surveillance that made it impossible to determine when or how Madison had left the master suite. How long was the video? Walsh asked, turning back to Chen. According to the metadata, exactly 57 seconds. Walsh made a note in her notebook, though she wasn't sure why the length of the video seemed significant. 57 seconds was long enough to record something important, but short enough to suggest it wasn't a lengthy explanation or goodbye message. Marcus, I need you to keep working on recovering that video, Walsh said, and I want you to examine every other device in this room. If someone had the technical knowledge to delete files in the way you're describing, they might have left traces on other systems. While Chen continued his forensic examination, Walsh decided to re-interview Jennifer Hayes, the estate manager, who had been notably absent during the critical period when Madison disappeared. Walsh found Jennifer in the mansion's main office, looking exhausted and overwhelmed by the investigation taking place around her. Jennifer, I need to ask you some more detailed questions about Tuesday night, Walsh said, settling into the chair across from Jennifer's desk. You mentioned that you left the island Wednesday morning due to a family emergency. Jennifer nodded, though Walsh noticed she seemed nervous about discussing her whereabouts. My mother had a fall Tuesday night. She was taken to the hospital. In Portland, and I got the call around 11:30. I took the first boat to the mainland Wednesday morning. Can you provide me with contact information for the hospital and your mother's doctors? Walsh asked. I'll need to verify your timeline. Of course, Jennifer said, though Walsh detected a slight hesitation before she provided the information. Detective, I've been managing Crystal Cove for 10 years, and nothing like this has ever happened. How guests come here for privacy and safety? I can't understand how someone could just disappear. Walsh studied Jennifer's face, looking for any sign of deception. The woman seemed genuinely distressed about Madison's disappearance, but there, was something about her demeanor that felt off. Walsh had learned to trust her instincts after 15 years in law enforcement, and her instincts were telling her that Jennifer was holding something back. "Jennifer, how well do you know the security system here?" Walsh asked. "The technical aspects of how it operates?" "I know how to check the cameras and review footage, but I'm not an expert on the technical side," Jennifer replied. "Thomas Reed from the security company handles all the maintenance and technical issues." "What about other staff members? Who else has access to the island and the mansion's systems?" Jennifer provided Walsh with a list of everyone who had access to Crystal Cove: maintenance staff, the boat captain, cleaning, personnel, and various contractors who performed work on the property. It was a surprisingly long list for such an exclusive and supposedly secure location. As the afternoon wore on, Walsh interviewed each person on Jennifer's list. Most had solid alibis for Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, and none of them had the kind of technical expertise that would be needed to manipulate Madison's phone in the way Chen had described. But one interview stood out as particularly troubling. Thomas Reed, the security technician, had been on the island Tuesday afternoon to perform routine maintenance on the camera system. He claimed to have left the island around 6 p.m., well before Madison's final video post. But Walsh noticed inconsistencies in his story about exactly what maintenance work he had performed. "Mr. Reed," Walsh said as they sat in the mansion's library, "can you explain why the security cameras began malfunctioning Tuesday night after you had supposedly completed maintenance on the system?" Reed shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Sometimes these systems develop issues after maintenance. It's not uncommon for there to be temporary glitches when components are adjusted or updated." "But you told Jennifer that the camera failures were unprecedented for this system," Walsh pointed out. "You said you'd never seen anything like the pattern of outages that occurred Tuesday night." "Well, every situation is different," Reed stammered. "Sometimes systems behave in unexpected ways." Walsh made detailed notes about Reed's contradictory statements and decided to have his background checked thoroughly. She also arranged for a second digital forensics expert to examine the security system independently, suspecting that Reed might have more knowledge about the camera failures than he was admitting. By Saturday evening, the search operation had expanded to include divers exploring the waters around Crystal Cove and additional Coast Guard vessels patrolling an even wider area. Madison's parents and Emma had been staying at a hotel in Bar Harbor, coming to the island each day to assist with the search efforts and to be present for any potential developments. Walsh found David and Susan Thompson sitting together on the mansion's front porch as the sun began to set, their faces etched with the kind of exhaustion that comes from days of unrelenting worry and fear. Emma was with them, all three united in their determination to find Madison, but increasingly frustrated by the lack of concrete answers. "Detective Walsh," Susan said as she approached, "have you learned anything new about the video that was deleted?" Walsh sat down next to them, choosing her words carefully. She didn't want to give them false hope, but she also didn't want to destroy the hope they were still clinging to. "We're still working on recovering the video, Mrs. Thompson. Our forensics expert is using every tool available, but it's going to take time." "What do you think the video showed?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would someone go to such lengths to destroy it?" "I don't know yet," Walsh admitted, "but I can tell you that whoever deleted that video had sophisticated technical knowledge. This wasn't someone acting randomly or impulsively. It was deliberate and carefully planned." David Thompson looked up at Walsh with the kind of direct gaze that had probably intimidated countless high school students over the years. "Detective, do you think our daughter is still alive?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, demanding honesty even if the truth was painful. Walsh had been dreading this moment, knowing that Madison's family deserved to know what she really thought about their daughter's chances. "Mr. Thompson," Walsh said carefully, "in my experience, when someone disappears under circumstances like these, leaving behind all their belongings, having no apparent motive to vanish voluntarily, and with evidence of potential technical manipulation, it usually indicates that something happened to them against their will." Susan Thompson's breath caught, and Emma reached over to squeeze her hand. David's expression didn't change, but Walsh could see him processing the implications of what she had just told them. "But," Walsh continued, We still don't know what happened or who might be responsible. We're following every lead and we're not giving up. I promise you that we're going to find answers. As darkness fell over Crystal Cove, Walsh stood alone in the master suite where Madison had spent her final known hours. The room felt different at night. The cheerful afternoon light had been replaced by shadows that seemed to harbor secrets, and the silence was so complete that Walsh could hear her own heartbeat. She walked to the window where Madison had filmed her final video, looking out at the same view that had made the young woman feel so uneasy. The ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, dark and unknowable in the moonlight. Walsh tried to imagine what Madison might have been thinking in those final moments, what she might have seen or heard that had prompted her to record that mysterious 57-second video. Walsh's phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. "Chen, still working on the video recovery. Found something else you need to see. Can you come to the lab first thing tomorrow morning?" As Walsh read the message, she felt that familiar mixture of hope and dread that came with potential breakthroughs. In difficult cases, every answer seemed to generate more questions, and every piece of evidence only deepened the mystery of what had happened to Madison Claire Thompson on that Tuesday night at Crystal Cove. Standing in that beautiful but now haunted master suite, Walsh made a silent promise to Madison and to her family. Whatever had happened here, whoever was responsible, and whatever secrets that deleted video contained, she would not rest until she had uncovered the truth. The case was about to take another disturbing turn, one that would challenge everything Walsh thought she understood about what was possible and what people were capable of doing to cover their tracks. The drive from Crystal Cove to Marcus Chen's laboratory in Portland normally took Detective Walsh an hour and 15 minutes, but on Sunday morning, she made it in just under an hour, driven by an urgent sense that Chen's discovery might finally provide the breakthrough the investigation desperately needed. She had barely slept Saturday night, her mind racing through all the evidence they had gathered and all the questions that remained unanswered. Chen's laboratory was housed in a nondescript office building that gave no indication of the sophisticated forensic work taking place inside. Walsh had worked with Chen on several cases over the years, and she had learned to trust his expertise implicitly. When Chen said he had found something significant, it was usually worth losing sleep over. She found Chen exactly where she expected him to be, hunched over a computer workstation surrounded by multiple monitors, empty coffee cups, and the kind of organized chaos that suggested he had been working through the night. His expression when he looked up at her was a mixture of excitement and deep concern. "Rebecca, I've been here since midnight," Chen said without preamble. I know what happened to Madison Thompson's video, and it's unlike anything I've ever encountered in 15 years of digital forensics." Walsh pulled up a chair next to Chen's workstation, her pulse quickening. "Show me what you found." Chen turned one of his monitors toward her, displaying what looked like a complex technical diagram. "I've been analyzing the phone's internal memory structure, looking for any traces of the deleted video file. Normally, when a file is deleted, even using sophisticated methods, there are always fragments left behind. Metadata, partial data clusters, something that indicates the file existed." "But you didn't find any fragments of Madison's video?" Walsh asked. "That's the thing," Chen said, highlighting sections of the diagram. "I did find fragments, but they don't match what I would expect from a typical video file. The metadata suggests the video was recorded normally at 10:13 p.m., but the deletion pattern indicates something was removed that was significantly larger than a 57-second video should have been." Walsh frowned. "What do you mean, larger? A 57-second video recorded on Madison's phone should have been approximately 40 to 60 megabytes, depending on the resolution and compression settings," Chen explained. "But the deletion pattern shows that nearly 300 megabytes of data were removed from the device. That's enough storage space for almost 10 minutes of high-quality video. So either the video was much longer than the metadata indicates, or something else was stored on the phone that was deleted at the same time," Walsh concluded. "Exactly. And here's where it gets really strange." Chen pulled up another screen, showing a timeline of the phone's activity. "I've been able to reconstruct some of the phone's operational data from Tuesday night. and I found evidence that the device was connected to another system during the time period when the video was recorded and deleted. Walsh leaned closer to the monitor. What kind of system? That's what I've been trying to figure out all night, Chen said. The connection data is fragmented, but it appears the phone was wirelessly synchronized with another device, possibly a laptop or tablet, for approximately 8 minutes starting at 10:15 p.m. and ending at 10:23 p.m. Could Madison have been backing up her videos to another device? Walsh asked. It's possible, but the synchronization pattern doesn't match any standard backup protocol I'm familiar with, Chen replied. It looks more like someone was using the phone to access or control another system remotely. Chen pulled up a third screen that showed a detailed breakdown of the phone's network activity during the critical time period. Look at this data traffic pattern. The phone was sending and receiving much more information than would be typical for a simple video recording. It's almost like the phone was being used as a conduit for some kind of remote operation. Walsh stared at the data, trying to understand the implications of what Chen was showing her. Marcus, are you saying someone was using Madison's phone to access other systems without her knowledge? I'm saying it's possible, Chen replied carefully. But if that's what happened, it would require extremely sophisticated knowledge and specialized equipment. We're talking about technology that most people wouldn't have access to, and certainly not the kind of thing someone could do casually or impulsively. Walsh felt the case shifting again, becoming more complex and more sinister with each new piece of information. What about the video itself? Any progress on recovering the actual content? Chen's expression grew even more troubled. That's the other thing I wanted to show you. I've been running advanced recovery algorithms all night, and I managed to retrieve a few seconds of fragmented video data. He opened a video player window on one of his monitors. The screen showed grainy, distorted footage that was barely recognizable, as coming from a phone camera. Walsh could make out what appeared to be the master suite at Crystal Cove, but the image quality was so poor that details were impossible to distinguish. This is less than 3 seconds of footage from what might be the beginning of Madison's video, Chen explained. The rest appears to have been overwritten multiple times to prevent recovery, but you can see Madison in the frame, and it looks like she's reacting to something. Walsh watched the brief clip several times, trying to extract any useful information from the distorted images. Madison appeared to be looking toward the camera with an expression that could have been surprise, fear, or confusion. It was impossible to tell from the fragmented footage. Can you enhance the image quality? Walsh asked. I've tried every enhancement technique available, Chen said. This is as clear as I can make it. But Rebecca, there's something else in this footage that you need to see. Chen zoomed in on a section of the video frame, highlighting an area that showed part of the master suite's interior. At first, Walsh couldn't see anything unusual, but then Chen pointed to a shadow in the background that seemed oddly shaped. I think there might be someone else in the room with Madison when this video was recorded, Chen said quietly. Walsh felt her pulse spike. Someone else? Can you tell who it is? The resolution is too poor to make out any identifying features, but there's definitely a shadow or figure in the background that doesn't match the room's furniture or fixtures, Chen replied. It could be another person, or it could be some kind of equipment or device that wasn't there when we searched the room. Walsh studied the enhanced image, trying to convince herself that the shadow was just a trick of the lighting or a compression artifact from the damaged video file. But the more she looked at it, the more convinced she became that Chen was right. There was something or someone in that room with Madison. Marcus, I need you to document everything you found and prepare a complete report, Walsh said. And I want you to keep working on that video recovery. If there's any chance of getting more footage, we need to find it. As Walsh drove back to Bar Harbor, her mind was racing with the implications of Chen's discoveries. The case had evolved from a puzzling disappearance into something that felt more like a carefully orchestrated crime involving sophisticated technology and detailed planning. But who would have the knowledge and resources to carry out such an operation? And why would they target Madison Thompson? She called the Maine State Police headquarters and requested background checks on everyone who had access to Crystal Cove. With particular attention to anyone with technical expertise, or connections to digital surveillance systems. She also asked for a detailed analysis of the property's ownership history and any previous incidents that might have occurred there. When Walsh arrived at Crystal Cove Sunday afternoon, she found Madison's family still maintaining their vigil, though their hope was clearly giving way to a more desperate kind of determination. Emma had been coordinating with Madison's followers on social media, asking them to share any information about unusual messages or interactions they might have had with Madison in the days leading up to her trip. Detective Walsh, David Thompson, said as she joined them on the mansion's porch, "Emma received some interesting messages from Madison's followers today. Several people mentioned that Madison had been acting differently in the weeks before her trip, more anxious, more secretive about her travel plans." Emma nodded, pulling out her phone to show Walsh the messages she had received. "Look at this one from a woman named Sarah Martinez. She says Madison had been asking unusual questions in their private messages about digital security and whether it was possible for someone to access her phone remotely." Walsh read through the messages Emma had compiled, noting several references to Madison expressing concerns about her privacy and digital security. One follower mentioned that Madison had asked about changing her passwords and using encrypted messaging apps. Another said Madison had seemed paranoid about someone watching her online activities. "This suggests Madison might have been aware that someone was monitoring her," Walsh said. "Did she mention any specific threats or incidents to any of you?" "Not to us," Susan Thompson replied. "But Madison didn't always share everything with us, especially if she thought it might worry us unnecessarily." Emma looked thoughtful. "There was something Madison mentioned about 3 weeks ago. She said she had been getting some weird direct messages from an account that didn't seem legitimate. She blocked the account, but she seemed more bothered by it than usual." "Do you remember any details about these messages?" Walsh asked. Madison said they weren't threatening exactly, but they were too personal, like someone knew details about her travel schedule and her private life that she hadn't shared publicly, Emma replied. She thought maybe it was someone from one of the hotels or resorts she had worked with, but she couldn't figure out how they would have gotten her private information. Walsh made detailed notes about the social media interactions and decided to have Chen examine Madison's entire digital footprint more thoroughly. If someone had been stalking or monitoring Madison online, there might be additional evidence of the surveillance that had led to her disappearance. As Sunday evening approached, Walsh received a call from the Coast Guard that the water search around Crystal Cove was being scaled back. After 4 days of intensive searching, they had found no evidence that Madison had entered the water voluntarily or accidentally. The decision to reduce the search efforts was another blow to her family's hopes, but it also supported Walsh's growing conviction that Madison's disappearance was the result of criminal activity rather than an accident. That night, Walsh returned to the master suite one more time, hoping that being in the space where Madison had spent her final known hours might provide some new insight into what had happened. She sat in the chair where Madison had filmed her last video, looking around the room and trying to imagine the sequence of events that had led to the young woman's disappearance. As Walsh reviewed her notes from the day, one detail from Chen's analysis kept bothering her. The phone data showed that Madison's device had been connected to another system for 8 minutes, but the video that was recorded was only 57 seconds long. What had been happening during the other 7 minutes? Was Madison being held somewhere else while someone used her phone? Or was she present but unable to control what was being recorded? Walsh's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed Marcus Chen's number. "Rebecca, I've been working on the phone data analysis all evening," Chen said without preamble. "I found something that changes everything we thought we knew about Tuesday night." "What did you find?" Walsh asked, her heart racing. "The phone's GPS data shows that it never left the master suite on Tuesday night," Chen said. "But I've been analyzing the device's internal accelerometer and gyroscope data, and I found evidence that the phone was moved extensively around the room during the time period when it was supposedly stationary on the nightstand." Walsh felt confused. How is that possible? The only explanation that makes sense is that someone was manipulating the phone's GPS data while physically moving the device around the room, Chen replied. "That would require extremely sophisticated technical knowledge and specialized equipment." Rebecca, whoever did this wasn't just deleting a video. They were conducting some kind of operation that required precise control over multiple electronic systems. As Walsh absorbed this new information, she realized that the case had moved far beyond a simple missing person investigation. They were dealing with someone who had planned Madison's disappearance with extraordinary care and technical sophistication. The question was no longer just what had happened to Madison Thompson. It was who had the capability and motive to carry out such an elaborate crime. The investigation was about to enter its most challenging phase as Walsh and her team attempted to track down a perpetrator who had demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to manipulate digital evidence and cover their tracks. But somewhere in the maze of electronic data and conflicting evidence, Walsh believed there were still clues that would lead them to the truth about Madison's fate. Standing in that haunted master suite, surrounded by the electronic devices that had captured Madison's final moments but refused to reveal their secrets, Walsh made a final promise to the missing woman and her family. She would follow every lead, analyze every piece of evidence, and pursue every possibility until she found the answers they desperately needed. The search for Madison Claire Thompson was far from over, but Walsh now understood that they were hunting for more than just a missing person. They were chasing someone who had turned technology into a weapon and had used it to make a young woman disappear without leaving behind any conventional evidence of their crime. As Walsh prepared to leave Crystal Cove, she couldn't shake the feeling that Madison was still out there somewhere, waiting to be found. The question was whether they would find her in time, and whether the person responsible for her disappearance would make a mistake that would finally expose them to justice. The investigation would continue, driven by the love of a family who refused to give up hope, and the determination of law enforcement professionals who understood that some cases define careers and test the very limits of what justice can achieve. Madison Thompson's story was far from over, and everyone involved in the search was committed to writing an ending that would bring her home. 3 months after Madison's disappearance, Detective Walsh received a call that would crack the case wide open. A former employee of the security company that serviced Crystal Cove had come forward with information about Thomas Reed and his involvement in illegal surveillance operations targeting wealthy guests at exclusive properties throughout New England. The employee, Patricia Williams, revealed that Reed had been secretly recording guests and selling the footage to an underground network that specialized in exploiting the private lives of influencers and celebrities. Madison had been targeted because of her massive social media following and the valuable content she created during her luxury travels. According to Williams, Reed had installed hidden recording devices throughout the Crystal Cove mansion, allowing him to monitor guests remotely and capture intimate moments that could be sold for substantial profits. Madison's final video had accidentally recorded Reed entering the master suite, forcing him to take drastic action to protect his criminal operation. The investigation revealed that Reed had used sophisticated technology to manipulate Madison's phone remotely, recording her reaction to discovering his presence and then deleting the evidence to cover his tracks. Madison had been taken from the island by boat during one of the orchestrated camera blackouts, and she was being held at a remote location while Reed decided how to handle the situation. Walsh and her team tracked Reed to an abandoned cabin in northern Maine, where they found extensive evidence of his surveillance operation and, most importantly, proof that Madison was still alive. She had been held captive for months, but Reed's desperation to avoid exposure had prevented him from taking more drastic action. Madison's rescue was the culmination of one of the most complex investigations in Maine's history, involving digital forensics, international cooperation with technology companies, and the persistence of a family who refused to accept that their daughter was gone forever. The reunion between Madison and her family was emotional beyond description, filled with tears of relief and gratitude for everyone who had refused to give up hope. Madison's first words to Detective Walsh were simple but profound. "Thank you for believing I was still out there." Thomas Reed was convicted on multiple charges related to kidnapping, surveillance crimes, and digital fraud. His criminal network was dismantled, and dozens of victims were identified and provided with support services. Madison returned to her career as a travel influencer, but with a new perspective on privacy, security, and the hidden dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most beautiful places. She became an advocate for digital safety and worked with law enforcement to educate other content creators about protecting themselves from sophisticated predators. The case became a landmark in digital forensics and demonstrated the importance of never giving up on missing person investigations, even when the evidence seems to point toward the impossible. Madison's story reminded everyone involved that behind every statistic and case file is a real person with family and friends who love them, and that the pursuit of justice requires both technical expertise and human compassion. Crystal Cove was closed permanently after the investigation, its reputation forever tainted by the crimes that had been committed there. But Madison's survival and the successful prosecution of those responsible proved that even the most sophisticated criminals can be caught when dedicated professionals refuse to accept defeat. As Detective Walsh reflected on the case years later, she often thought about the moment when Marcus Chen first showed her the evidence of the deleted video. That single piece of digital evidence had seemed like an insurmountable obstacle, but it had ultimately provided the key to solving one of the most complex cases of her career. Madison Thompson's disappearance had challenged everything Walsh thought she knew about criminal investigation in the digital age, but it had also demonstrated that traditional police work, following leads, interviewing witnesses, and never giving up, remained the foundation of successful law enforcement. The Tor case would be studied in criminal justice programs and digital forensics courses for years to come, serving as a reminder that the intersection of technology and crime creates new challenges that require innovative solutions and unwavering determination. But for Madison and her family, the most important outcome was simpler than any academic analysis could capture. A daughter had come home, a family had been reunited, and justice had been served against those who had tried to steal a young woman's life and freedom. The story of Madison Claire Thompson's disappearance and rescue became a testament to the power of love, hope, and the refusal to accept that some mysteries cannot be solved. It reminded everyone who heard it that even in our increasingly digital world, the most important investigations are still driven by the very human desire to protect the innocent and ensure that those who harm others are held accountable for their actions. If you've been moved by Madison's story, if you've felt the fear and hope alongside her family, and if you've experienced the relief of her rescue, then you understand the power of never giving up on those we love. This case reminds us that behind every missing person is a family in anguish, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply refuse to forget that someone is still out there, waiting to come home. Take a moment to appreciate the people in your life who matter most to you. Share this story with others who might need to hear that hope is never truly lost. Like this video if Madison's story touched your heart. Subscribe to stay connected to more stories of survival and justice, and let us know in the comments how this case has affected your understanding of the hidden dangers in our digital world. Remember, Madison's courage, honor the determination of those who never stopped searching for her, and never forget that even in the darkest moments, there are people working tirelessly to bring the missing home and ensure that justice prevails.